Welcome to Ruffing the Passer, show where I talk football, miscellaneous stuff, and mostly football. I am your host, Sam Ruffing, and this week's episode I'll be talking about why Sean Payton's moves recently are a little concerning, why wherever Derek Carr signs, the team will end up being disappointed, and let's get on to it, the Super Bowl. This past week, the Super Bowl was played between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was a beautiful game leading up for 58 minutes with back and forth offense. Eagles dominating the first half, Chiefs dominating the second half, each scoring 24 points in their respective halves. And it coming down to the wire in what should have been an all-time classic Super Bowl. For a Super Bowl leading up that which I was not hugely excited because, well, the circumstances of which the teams got there. I mean, the Eagles got there on one of the easiest schedules in the NFL, and the Kansas City Chiefs got there because of, sheer luck or unluck and referees' interference. But despite all that, it was a great game for the most part, right up until the final 2 minutes when on 3rd and 6, Patrick Mahomes threw a uncatchable ball to Juju Smith-Schuster that landed like 10 yards away from him in the end zone. And then when the Eagles had only one timeout left, which would have given the Eagles the ball back with about a minute 40, and it could have, sent the Eagles to overtime against the Chiefs, but there was a flag thrown on the field after the play, and because that ball wasn't catchable, the refs couldn't obviously call pass interference, so they could decide to call holding. Now, when I first saw this play, I didn't see any holding. And upon further review, I didn't see holding. Yet they claim that James Bradbury, Philadelphia's cornerback, grabbed Juju Smith-Schuster and held him back. And if you watch the play, either he did, and it's the most ticky-tacky thing ever, or his holding just did not slow down the play whatsoever. And from that moment on, they, of course, because it's, holding on the defense, it was 5 yards and an automatic first down. And the Chiefs ran out the clock and won the game with a field goal that was a chip shot, thus ruining what was a beautiful Super Bowl that was honestly pretty fairly reffed throughout most of the game. I mean, not greatly reffed, but it wasn't hugely impacted by the refs to a great extent. It could have been completely excusable, but no, they had to ruin the entire game on that one holding call. And I just don't understand how you can throw the flag there. I mean, if you look at the play, maybe James Bradbury has the slightest jersey tug, but I cannot see it when watching. Like, there's an angle before, maybe, but even then, it was so unnoticeable. And in the Super Bowl, you're going to make that call. I mean, Logan Wilson's hold last year in the Super Bowl against the Rams looked more egregious than this one. And that was called, but then this one is called as well, even though, it shouldn't have been. And sure, maybe by technicality it was holding. But, how do you make that call? How do you say, yeah, no, we're going to end the game this way? How do you not just let them play it out? I don't get it. And the fact that we were robbed of a chance to see Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts go into overtime and duel it out is a darn shame for America. I mean, that would have just been a beautiful duel. It was already back and forth. It would have gone till 3 in the morning. It would have been great, but no. The refs decided to completely ruin it with that one holding call. And you know what? There are people it looks like holding. Well, if that's holding, then how come that play against Juju Smith-Schuster earlier in the Super Bowl, which was more egregious, wasn't called holding? How come in the AFC Championship game on that Mahomes scramble, there wasn't holding called against the Kansas City Chiefs tackle Orlando Brown Jr. on Trey Hendrickson? He was holding him like this, and his arms are like this, and how is that one not called holding? And I'm not even complaining because I think that, this call was definitely the reason Philly lost. No, Philadelphia had plenty of chances to lose, yet they were still in it. And they also didn't help themselves with Jalen Hurts' fumble, and the defense getting no traction on that new turf. But the fact that that it still came down to that call, basically, is just egregious. And also, the Kansas City Chiefs have had a reputation over the past few years of getting all the calls go their way. And so when the Chiefs have a call that looks so ticky-tacky, yeah, fans are going to be skeptical. And they're going to be mad. And they're going to call it out, okay? Should not have been called holding. It did not look like holding. I mean, I was watching at a Super Bowl party, and pretty much everyone there was like, where the heck's the hold? You know that meme with the monkeys and the chimps or whatever that are sitting on the set of like a morning news show? And they're just like, one of them's like, where, whatever. Just do that. Where holding? How do you make that call? It was terrible. It was egregious. And it's not like the Kansas City Chiefs still wouldn't have won. They had all the momentum in the second half. Their offense was firing on all cylinders. Their defense was still playing well. Chris Jones was going off. Travis Kelce was going off. They still could have won that game. It's not like this ultimately was what doomed the Eagles. What really more doomed the Eagles was that Devontae Smith, no catch in the first half, which doesn't make any sense considering, he had the ball 2 feet down, and I think he maintained possession. Yet for some reason that wasn't called a catch. Of course, you could have easily offset that with the play later in the game with Eagles running back Miles Sanders, I think, who, had that catch fumble, which wasn't called a catch because he didn't make a football move. And while I didn't think it was a catch because he didn't make a football move, but you could make an argument that it was a catch. It's not like... So you had one going against each team. And if you ruin a Super Bowl with a holding call at the end, it just kills it. I mean, it was so anticlimactic, the way it ended. And man, there are people who were just like, I didn't want to watch this Super Bowl because of the way the Chiefs got there with the 5 non-calls. 5 calls went against Cincinnati, and not a single one against, Kansas City. They already have a reputation of getting favorable calls from the refs. So this did not help their case, and it honestly marred what would have been a great Super Bowl win by the Kansas City Chiefs. It was just tragic. It shouldn't have been called. If the game were to be a do-over, I would not make that call. And you know what? Maybe I would assume that Jalen Hurts would have led a field goal drive. At least. I mean, maybe he could have been stopped by the Chiefs defense. I don't think so, but he could have been stopped by the Chiefs defense. Maybe he could have gone all the way and scored a touchdown. I don't know. The Eagles offense was flying, but just to end the Super Bowl, not because of skill, not because of talent, but because the refs, the Zebras, had to make one atrocious call. It's just a darn shame. It truly is. And it marred what would have been an all-time classic Super Bowl. I guess there is a reason why they picked Carl Cheffers for refereeing that Super Bowl. It sure does sound a lot like Carl Chiefers, which is now how I'm going to refer to them. Also, every time I'm going to talk about that Super Bowl for the Chiefs, I'm just kidding, but every time I'm going to talk about that Super Bowl, I'm going to put an asterisk next to the Chiefs' name. Anyways, moving on. Congratulations, Kansas City. You won your third Super Bowl of all time. You're now tied with the Denver Broncos and Las Vegas Raiders in your division for Super Bowl wins. Hopefully, Sean Payton can get Denver back up to that lead, but who knows? Anyways, congratulations. You have a great quarterback. Mahomes is great. I wish your Super Bowls were not marred by these plays. Because if you had won, I would have been a lot more. If you had won without that play, I would have been a lot more impressed, honestly. I still probably would have called out the Devontae Smith no catch, but I would have been a lot more impressed had you won otherwise. Moving on, for real this time, I swear, I promise. Tiger Woods played all 4 rounds at the Genesis Invitational, his tournament that he hosts in Riviera. The one 2 years ago where he left after an interview and got into a car crash after traveling like 80 miles an hour, and it completely destroyed his leg, and there were worries that he'd never play golf again. Yet he was back out there at Riviera this past weekend, and honestly, he played pretty well for, the circumstances. Obviously, he wasn't anywhere close to the winner, Jon Rahm, at like 17 under, but Tiger shot 1 under on the tournament, played really, really well on a tough course. And the fact that he got in 4 rounds is very, very good for his the fact that he needs more practice walking on that absolutely obliterated leg. And honestly, watching him, I think the mental game is still there. And yeah. So good for him. I was going to make some bold prediction like he wins the Masters this year, but I don't know. We'll see when that time comes around. But good for him. Great to see him back out there, and obviously drew in a lot of viewers because he's the biggest name in golf of all time. And the sport is worse without him. It's true, sadly. Right. The Raiders have finally decided to cut Derek Carr. Hallelujah! It took them 9 years of absolutely good but mediocre play. Good stats and mediocre play for the Las Vegas Raiders to finally realize that Derek Carr was not going to lead them anywhere close to the promised land, and they decided to cut bait. And they're better off for it. And I know that the media talking heads and people who don't know or haven't actually watched Derek Carr will think that this is an appalling take. Like, how dare you? How dare you criticize a man who has like a career pass rating of 95? That's pretty good. That's better than Peyton Manning's career average. And I'm like, whatever. Derek Carr was cut on February the 14th, I think, sometime before Valentine's Day, before his before his salary was guaranteed with the Raiders, so that they wouldn't suffer a huge cap hit by cutting him. They were almost going to make a deal to the Saints, but Derek Carr decided, no, I don't want that to happen. I'm not going to the Saints via trade. Maybe because he didn't want to go to the Saints because they're $16 million over the cap, and honestly, the roster's not great. Or the fact that he just wanted to get cut by the Raiders so he can sign with the Saints without having the Saints give up any draft capital for him, because it could have been a first-round pick because teams are willing to overspend, but I doubt it. And so the Raiders are now without a quarterback. They have Josh McDaniels as their head coach, so not a great situation in all reality. But they do have a semi-decent draft pick. They went like 6-11 this year, 7-10. One of those two. And they can obviously trade up, if need be, to draft a quarterback who has a higher ceiling than Derek Carr, who can actually win big games and lead the Raiders back to consistent playoffs. And I know everyone thinks this is a terrible move by the Raiders, but like, the man had 9 years there. You know how many playoff wins he had? Zilcho. Absolute butt kiss. Not a single playoff win, and he only made the playoffs twice. One of them he was injured for. And he probably wouldn't have won that playoff game because the Raiders played against the Houston Texans led by Brock Osweiler, who I dearly love. He's like one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. I love you, Brock Osweiler. But I think he could have lost to the Raiders with Derek Carr. But even still, the team is trying to fool themselves into thinking Derek Carr was the answer at quarterback for the past 9 years, and maybe that looked right during the 2016 season where he had a MVP-like campaign. But after that, he just was never the same quarterback. He was too safe. He got the ball out too quickly. I don't know. It just couldn't win big games. And he was really holding back the Raiders' potential because let's not forget, the Raiders' offenses of the last few years have had some great weapons. I mean, they had Latavius Murray in 2016, who was great, Michael Crabtree in 2016, and, Murray Cooper. And then from beyond that, they had Murray Cooper still Michael Crabtree, and Latavius Murray was on a different team at that point, but they had decent offenses. They had a great O-line at one point. And then recently, from the 2019 season, they had Darren Waller, who's, top 5 tight end in the NFL, which is, a huge weapon. And still Derek Carr was putting up average numbers, nothing spectacular. And then this past season, they trade for Davante Adams to go along with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. And Derek Carr puts up 14 interceptions, tying the league lead, and 24 touchdowns. That's it. When you have Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow, not to mention Josh Jacobs' resurgent year, and one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL, and Josh McDaniels, who might not be a great coach, but sure as heck can call a game. On the offensive side anyways, his defense is trash, but even still. And so yeah, it was a good move by the Raiders to let go of him finally, and now they'll get a better quarterback and come in and lead him to the promised land. Well, probably not the promised land, but at least lead him out of mediocrity to semi-relevance for real this time. And as for the team that signs Derek Carr, they're going to be sold a bag of false goods. I'm calling it right now. I mean, the places he's projected to go are teams who have decent rosters, but need, a stable quarterback. A guy like, the Buccaneers did the last few years, the Los Angeles Rams did, like Denver tried to do last year, but Nathaniel Hackett brought the entire ship down. And like the Jets need right now, and New Orleans needs right now, and of course everyone thinks that if Derek Carr goes to the New York Jets, he'll turn the team instantly around. They'll be 12-5 and a first seed and win the Super Bowl, which is just not going to happen. Yeah, New York Jets have great weapons, and, Elijah Moore. No, not him. Who's the guy who won Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year? I can't remember his name. He was so boring. It was just such an pick. They have a decent running back. I also can't remember his name. I do apologize. I don't know. It's just fleeting my memory. And, yeah, they have a decent O-line. They have good running backs and good skill positions, but other than that, I mean, yes, they have a great defense, and so you'd think that a great quarterback would lead them to the promised land, especially when their last few quarterbacks have been Mike White and Zach Wilson. But Derek Carr, as a quarterback, has only been to the playoffs twice, or has only had 2 winning seasons, only played in a playoff game once and lost it, despite having a chance to win it. I mean, sure, maybe it's another Matt Stafford scenario, but if he goes there, I don't see that happening. Yes, Robert Saleh is a good coach, but I mean, this team was 5-2 last year with Zach Wilson. And that's not an indictment on Zach Wilson. He actually did something to get those teams wins. It's not like he was completely holding them back. In fact, when they benched him, the team got worse. So it's not like Derek Carr is going to be a huge upgrade. I know everyone thinks he is, but he hasn't won big games. I mean, Zach Wilson beat the Bills last year, and the Steelers, and the Packers. He was getting wins. I don't know if Derek Carr can win those games. I'm sure he'll make the playoffs with them, but I don't think he's going to win a playoff game. I mean, I think he'll win a few playoff games. I don't think it's going to be great. He's just never been a hugely talented quarterback who's shown the ability to win huge, close games. And honestly, whenever he has done that, it's because he's been carried around by another roster. And maybe that happens, but when it's deep in the fourth quarter in the playoffs, and it's Joe Burrow versus Derek Carr, who you trusting with the ball late? I'm trusting Joe Burrow to win that game, not Derek Carr. So yeah, whoever signs him, I don't think it's going to work out as well as people would think. I could be wrong. But I think the Raiders made the right move here by getting rid of him and just starting fresh, because they weren't going anywhere with him. And with drafting a new quarterback, likely that guy out of Kentucky, they can go places, potentially. Right. Now on to Sean Payton. The new Denver Broncos head coach, since being hired, has made some good statements in his press conferences, like, I want hard work. I want to see Russ. I don't want Russ having his own offense or his players in the or his team in the building. You're going to work. We're going to grind out victories, and we're going to get this team right on track. Which I was like, yes, finally a coach who's saying the right things. And then this past week, inexplicably, or this past few weeks, he's making videos with the Denver Broncos social media team like, look, I crossed out the B in Denver and added a G in front of it to make it the Broncos. Come on, Rob Gronkowski, come over here, play with me. And yes, I love Rob Gronkowski, but I mean, come on, man. What kind of silliness is this? I mean, and then during the Super Bowl, pregame, they're making their picks on Fox, who's going to win, and obviously Sean Payton was still doing the broadcast with Fox because he had the deal. He was going to finish out the season despite being named Denver Broncos head coach, and he was with Gronk, and he's like, hey, Gronk, before I make my pick, come to Denver, man. We'll go places. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This Broncos team hasn't made the playoffs in 7 years. They have the longest playoff drought of a team that has won the Super Bowl. I mean, they have the longest drought of a team that has won the Super Bowl and has yet to make it back to the playoffs. I'm sorry for saying it so confusingly, but I am sick and tired of being hyped in quarterbacks like Russell Wilson and Drew Lock and Trevor Siemian, and new coaches promising that this isn't a rebuild but a reboot, death by inches, and whatever the heck Nathaniel Hackett was trying to sell with his whatever snake oil that was. I am also with the fiasco of the Danger Witch last year and the Broncos Country Let's Ride. I'm sick and tired of players coming to this team, acting like fools or coaches, and then absolutely getting destroyed in the regular season. You know what? This was once a proud franchise. A franchise that has won 3 Super Bowls and made the Super Bowl 8 times, which obviously is not a great record. But despite that, they were a constant contender in the AFC. It took them, from 1960-something to 2016, they had the longest, they didn't have back-to-back losing seasons ever from that span. And now, you're coming in here saying all this stuff, and yet you decide to interview Rex Ryan as your defensive coordinator. A man who hasn't called shots in the NFL since 2016 when he was the Bills head coach. And sure, maybe Rex Ryan was a great defensive coordinator. I know he was. But I am a little skeptical of guys who haven't been around in the NFL for this long, coming in here and seeing what happens. I remember his defense back in 2016. It was terrible, despite him being a defensive coach. And so I'm a little worried when I see, Sean Payton come in here supposedly saying we need to work hard, and then interviewing guys like Vance Joseph, who already coached in Denver and hasn't had a good defense the last few years. And then Rex Ryan, who hasn't coached in 7 years since the Broncos last had a winning season, mind you. So maybe the Broncos do need Rex Ryan. Anyways, listen, Sean, if you're watching this, I don't know why you'd be watching this. Take this dang job seriously. I know that there is a lot to like about Denver. They have a great city. They have a potentially good quarterback in Russell Wilson, who your offensive scheme should help, because so help me if he's not fixed, then I'm not sure what to say. They have a great defense, and obviously loads of skill position players. You just need to get an O-line. Stop taking this job not so seriously. You need to take this darned job seriously. And not Vic Fangio stubbornly seriously. I mean, for real, seriously. Where You're working in and day out. Not going around like, hey, we got Russell Wilson, let's ride. We had a great week of practice. Hey, I hate Drew Lock with a burning passion. And Teddy Bridgewater is my favorite quarterback of all time. I mean, put in the work, stay quiet, and just let your play on the field do the talking. None of this Gronkaneers crap. You already have Greg Dulcich. Although, if you did want to go to Denver, please do so. You'd be a great addition. First of all, we need to focus on fixing Russ, then the O-line, and getting another pass rusher. After that, we'll see. I need you to make the playoffs, and if that does not happen, I'll be extremely disappointed. So please take this job seriously. This has been Roughing the Passer. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and share it with your friends and family. If you like my stuff, subscribe for more. And hit that bell to stay notified when all future uploads are initially uploaded. I thank you very much for watching. It has been a little too long since I last recorded. I do apologize, but I appreciate your viewership, and I will see you later. Good night. Let's ride!